Welcome to Heartspeak Podcast, episode 47, Feeling is Healing. Well, as you can hear by my accent, I come from the land of the stiff upper lip. Do not show your emotions, do not let the side down, hold your dignity, whatever's going on, keep quiet. You can express it at home perhaps, or even into your journal, but otherwise keep quiet. And we're very proud that we do this. In fact, we're very nervous when people get angry around us or get sad. We get embarrassed. And I know we're not the only nation that does this. I've been to other nations where, again, other people's emotions can cause us to want to slide under the table or disappear. But is this healthy? Well, we think it is because we keep doing it. And we think that what's the important thing is you just move on. Life happens and you just move on. But I'm going to suggest that the very word emotion, energy in motion, tells us that feeling is an important part of our process, important part of our transformation. And when we feel, we don't only heal, we heal into wholeness. We become more than we are. So when we don't have emotion, then we are missing out. In fact, we don't have the energy to allow us to change. So I don't believe in philosophies that say, oh, learn how to curb your emotions. Don't get angry, don't get sad, don't get fearful. This isn't actually helpful. This is just suppression, depression, and we find ourselves then not being able to really be in touch with our deepest self. Now, for some of you, you might say, I'm always expressing my emotions. Lucky me, I'm always transforming. Well, that might be the case or may not be, because there's a lot to be said for not just a few tears coming out your eyes or even bubbling over, but that deep sob that you might want to have, that when you really do know that whatever's been going on, there's an end to it. I like to see crying as the waves that come in and sweep away the old sandcastle, the old life you've had, so that when we cry, the tears are tears of cleansing, clearing, making new. And that often happens to us, doesn't it? We may be grieving, but maybe in the early days of our grieving, we cried, but there's this time where we really sob and we realize things will never be the same again. And they won't be, because we've literally used our tears to clear something. And there is anger. Some people say, oh, I'm always angry. I'm just such an angry person. But you can hear the anger is locked up in the throat. It never goes any deeper. And I hope you've had times where you've really got angry, indignantly angry, and you've allowed yourself to roar. And that's not anger as in, how can I say, trying to destroy someone, but a true expression of how you feel. So throughout my work, both in my counseling work and in my work in seminars, I say, come on, give me a roar, like a lion. People will say, oh, oh. I say, no, let's go a little deeper. So a roar needs to come up from your feet. It's that energy. You might like to try this. And this helps us to really express, feel the energy. Really is dragon energy that we're drawing on. Dragon energy being the energy not only of creativity, but also transformation. So you're bringing this energy up, you're burning away the old in order to move forward. And I remember someone telling me, I was talking about emotion, and they said to me, I know all about that. And I said, well, I'm now working with how the mind, the emotions and the beliefs affect the body. They said, yes, I know that. It's mind over matter. And I went, no, actually, it actually is not mind over matter. It's saying what you mind does matter. Your emotions do matter. And it really is a case of us learning how to honor how we feel and not suppress those feelings. Now, you again may be saying, this is what I do all the time. And I say, well, that's good, but it's important to know that you have a safe place to express your emotions. Now, my safest place is a car. I don't know about you, but as long as my windows are wound up, I find my car knows more about my emotions than anything else. You can do the same thing down by an ocean, or as we did in Iceland, behind a beautiful waterfall where so much lovely noise. It wasn't about being angry, it was about really expressing my joy. So I hope you have a place where you can really express how you feel. And I remember an episode where I was just finishing with a boyfriend, and I felt, oh, I can't do this again. It was just so sad. And I was driving along a motorway, a freeway, and all of a sudden I went, oh, I can't do that. And the car went, da, 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 and came to a stop along on the side. And I got out and called help, called the Automobile Association, and they came along. And it was in the days where you had sparking plugs that you had to screw into the place. And this sparking plug had completely unwound itself and thrown itself across the engine. And the gentleman who came to help me said, how on earth did that happen? And I thought, I better not tell you that I just went, oh! So I would say to you, it is be wise with how you express your emotions, and sometimes where you do as well. Because your car is a very sensitive organ as well, and it really helps us in so many ways. It is the vehicle for our lives. Now, is it enough just to express an emotion? No, it isn't, because there's a great study that was done on looking at the effect of emotion on the immune system. And they took a group of actors, divided them in two randomly, and the first group were asked to give an audition one at a time. And whatever they did, they were told they were fantastic, go to Hollywood, great, off you go. And as they were leaving, they took some blood from them, and they found that with their happiness, the immune response went up, which is what they expected. Then they took the other group, and again, one at a time, they performed their audition, and whatever they did, they were told they were rubbish. Go away, don't give up your day job. And they took the blood again, and they thought that the immune response would go down, and in fact, it went up. And this was, I think, such an important piece of research to show that when you express the right emotion at the right time, your immune system actually responds in a positive way. And I've seen this when I've applied kinesiology, muscle testing, that I've said to someone, okay, imagine or remember a time when you felt indignant, but righteously indignant, angry, but it was a righteous, and the arm stayed strong. But when I said, just remember a time when you felt frustrated or resentful, and the arm went down. You can try this yourself. And again, I use the idea of sadness, a deep sadness, and just a sadness that things maybe weren't working out the way you wanted. And on the second time it went down, the arm went down, it was weakened because of not expressing the appropriate emotion. And of course, we all do that. Maybe sometimes we get angry when really we're feeling frightened. We sometimes feel sad when we should be angry. Clearly, many people show a happy face, but that isn't how they're feeling. Their body tells me something else. So when I meet people who have got a lot of tension in their neck or in their jaw, or even in their gallbladder and liver area, I will ask them, how do you deal with your anger? And they go, oh, I never get angry. And I can see it in their jaw, their muscles are all so tight, but they won't let that anger come through. And that's interesting for me, because the throat chakra is the place of change. And often what we do is we bring our shoulders up around our neck, our ears, as blocking our throat chakra when we feel angry but we don't express it. So this ability to express from here is so important to help us to move. Here I am giving you some tips already, that it was often seen that there were 4 emotions, and that was fear, happy, anger, and sad. They were the 4 main emotions. So that is glad, bad, mad, and sad. And I kind of like the way that that came together. And in most traditions, most medical, or I should say healing traditions, those different emotions are linked to different illnesses or different organs. And so in Chinese medicine, for instance, the heart and the small intestine are related to happiness and joy. But there's always a downside to that. You might say, well, what can be wrong with being happy? Sometimes, as I say, it's almost a mania that you're trying to make yourself happy when it's not how you're feeling. And the small intestine and the heart have so much to do with what nurtures you. So it's not just being happy and often making other people happy. It's, am I enjoying my own life? Am I nurturing myself? Do I know the difference between other people's energy and my energy? Then when it comes to anger, we link that to the liver. I've already mentioned the tendons, the jaw muscles, the fibroids, other organs are connected to these problems. And the gallbladder is also there. It's kind of the minor organ. So again, when you feel angry, you feel resentful, that's a great time to say, wow, something needs to change. Something needs to move, because liver is the energy of movement, often bringing about change. And I say that when we feel angry, you either have to change your attitude or change your position. So it's either saying, okay, I'm going to stop whining on about this, or I'm not going to keep getting frustrated about this. I'm going to do something different, or I'm just going to change. And again, part of the British way is, and I'm sure it's not just British, which is, I'm not complaining, but you would have thought the blah, blah, blah. But it's okay. It's okay. But, I can understand where they're coming from, but that's so much a way of the gallbladder. This anger, but not wanting to upset people. So gallbladder is so much about decision making. So you're wanting to move forward, but if I say anything, I'm going to upset other people, so I'm just going to sit back. I know that one very well. I have green eyes. Green eyes are so much connected to the liver gallbladder essence. So any of you who've got hazel green eyes, you probably have difficulty also making decisions, or the right decision for you, because you'll be thinking of other people. Of course, there's another illness that Louise Hay used to talk about, which is cystitis, bladder infection. I'm just jumping there, but that's to do with fear and anger. So she would talk about being pissed off, but you're not going to change anything, which has moved me down to the kidney area, the bladder area, connected to fear. So fear of lack of security, lack of knowing where you're going, fear of the unknown. So it's fear, not so much of upsetting people, but fear of not fitting in, fear of being outside the box. So much kidney cancer and bladder cancer comes, or I see it in cultures where there are very strict rules about fitting in, and anybody outside is shunned or rejected or abandoned. So bladder, kidney is so much about making sure that you fit in and you really tap into the strong energy. Is fear useful? You might say, why on earth would you have fear? Fear is mystery. So that it might be that you would say, well, why would I ever want to enter mystery? Well, it shatters fear. When we take it to away from anxiety and just the fear, it shatters the old and puts us in a place of creative energy. So I could say the opposite of fear is excitement and inspiration. So when we move into the fear, we actually allow ourselves to enter into a place of the unknown excitement. And sad's linked to the lungs. We always say lungs connect to grief, sadness, tears. So that often we see tears happening, where skin can weep, and even digestion, diarrhea, constipation. Sometimes constipation is not wanting to let go of something, and diarrhea is everything just rushing through you. I can't cope with this. It's just got to go. So large intestine is connected to the lungs, and so both of them have a sense of letting go, clearing out, everything needing to move. I hope that helps you to also look at the body. I mean, I think there's so much wisdom in the body already there. So when I remember talking to someone who had lots of sinus problems, and everybody looked at diet and allergies. But as I always say, said, what was going on when you started to notice your sinus problems? And she said, I left home. I left the place where I lived. I left the country I lived in. I moved to another country. Hello, that was enough to cause grief. No, it wasn't the allergies from the country she moved into or the food she was now eating. It's the fact she was sad. She was miserable. She didn't want to have left. So when we put all these ideas together, we see once again that there's a strength in knowing those emotions. And there, as I mentioned, there's one could say an acuteness, an appropriateness to an emotion. So feeling sad appropriately is good. Feeling angry appropriately is good. And obviously moving your energy because of those things. But when we shut down on our sadness, we become depressed. We become dispirited. We're holding on to the old, and the old is no longer there. We need to be able to have the courage to let go. When we hold on to anger, we go into, first of all, resentment, and then bitterness. Bitterness and hatred are terrible energies, only because once you're bitter, we have a phrase that says bitter and twisted. Our mind gets twisted. Once our mind is twisted, we get set in our ways. And so much prejudice and bias, it comes from ancient stories being passed down about not trusting other people. And that bitterness and twisted and hatred, there's no movement in that. Nothing's going to change from that place. And then fear, it's, our fear, when we express it, I'm terrified about what I'm about to do. Yay! But when we don't express it and again have that courage to enter into mystery, we end up with anxiety, chronic anxiety, worrying all the time, worrying about the unknown, not fitting in. Sometimes, well, a lot of the time, we can't control the unknown. We can't control life. And living in that fear, that unrealistic fear that we can control things, it just causes us greater distress. Now, what I'm saying is there are many a time where being fearful is very appropriate. Being angry is very appropriate. Being sad is very appropriate. But once it goes on and on and on, we actually find that it starts to cause us problems. Are you following me here? I think you are. So appropriate expression of feelings, very important. Knowing your feelings, very important as well. One of the exercises I do when I'm teaching online course on holistic medicine is looking at stress. And I'm so amazed how few people actually know what causes their stress or knows how that impacts their body. What beliefs are being brought to the surface, being triggered. Now, just a little bit of detail there. Stress is good for us. So every morning, that stressor that gets you out of bed, that stressor that gets you to work, that stressor that does whatever it does is good. It's a pressure that moves us. But when that stress becomes strain, then we feel it. And many a time people are challenged already in this daily life with a sense of strain. You don't have to have diagnosed PTSD to feel that you're traumatized, that life is challenging. And so often you wake up in the morning already at the level of, I'm not coping with life. And then everything starts to build up on you. You feel everybody's getting at you, or you're oversensitized to sounds and lights and smells, whatever. And then you know you're at that point of burnout. Then you really do need to stop and think what's going on, or again, listen to your emotions. But prior to that, let's just deal with minor stresses or stresses that may occur in your daily life, and ask yourself, what causes me stress in my daily life? And maybe it's when people ask you for too much, or too much to do, too much pressure on you to do things. Or maybe it's when there are too many things to do. It's not just there's time pressure, but there may be work pressure or home pressure, so many things to put into your life. Or maybe it's when someone doesn't call you, or maybe it's a friendship who you just don't feel that you're getting close to that person. So please ask yourself, what is my stress, or what will stress me? I remember a girl years ago saying that her mother could say to her, you're not clever, or you're fat, or you're ugly. She said, I could cope with all of that. But she said, when my mother says you disappoint me, that was when she really got stressed. And so the next step of this is, what do you feel? What do you feel emotionally? And what do you feel in your body? Where does your body react to that stress? Do you, again, disappear? Some people, when they get stressed, they just blank out. Some people get angry. Some people start crying. Some people fold their arms. Some people shout. Some people lose their voice. What happens to you when you get stressed? And what particular emotion is being expressed at that time? Do you know what you're feeling? And often it's like anger, but is there something underneath the anger? Oh yes, because I'm actually fearful that I'll lose my job, or I fear that the person doesn't love me or like me. What is the thing? Often it is fear at the bottom of our emotions. What is it that's coming up for you? And then ask yourself, what's the belief system that's getting triggered? Maybe it is that you've been rejected and abandoned previously. So when someone, turns their back on you, or even just says, oh, for goodness sake, go away, that old energy comes to the surface again. Or maybe when you were a child and you were asked to speak in the class in front of everybody else, you lost your voice or you couldn't speak. So do you get stressed when you're asked to speak in public? And does your voice go again? Because it wasn't so much your voice going, but everybody laughing at you. Was it shame you felt? What is it you feel? And then the final piece of this is, how are you going to change things? Now, it's not enough just to say, I'm going to tell myself I'm okay, or I can speak in public. I know there's that common quote about just imagine everybody naked. That doesn't really work for me. I'm too visual, and it's like, how's that helping me? I think I'm more embarrassed by them being naked. But what would help you? Sometimes, as NLP would show you, it's just changing your posture. Maybe bring your shoulders back. Maybe it's standing in a certain way. Maybe it's rooting yourself into the earth. That certainly helps. I remember years ago I was being given some speech lessons, and the man pointed out that I was always on the move when I was talking. It's part of my Gemini nature to be always moving. But he said it's much better if you move, then talk. And I do take that into account, that makes me more strong when I'm speaking, or the point I'm trying to put across. So whatever you're going to change, please think of something practical you can do. Not meditate necessarily. That's, again, sometimes running away. But it could be, I'm going to take some deep breaths. I'm going to root myself. I'm going to say very quietly to someone, please stop talking to me like that. Or please respect me. Or I've heard this before, I think I need to move away from you. Maybe sometimes we have simple words. It doesn't have to be the anger. Maybe you want to be angry, but maybe you just need to honor yourself and respect yourself and say, sorry, that's not okay anymore. So thinking of something you could do differently is really helpful. And that helps your body know that you are dealing with the stress, not just your mind. And when your body feels you relaxing, breathing out, then so does your mind quieten down. So this leads me to the wonderful work of two great scientists. First, Candace Pert, neuroscientist, who was a fantastic pioneer in understanding how the chemicals interact with the brain and the chemicals interact with the genes of how we process stress. And Candace Pert, I did have the privilege of meeting her once or twice, and she was a wonderful woman, very outspoken and very sensitive. And she was originally given a grant to find out where were the receptor sites in the brain for the opioids. An opioid is, as you probably know, it is morphine, it is heroin, which is the same thing. But she was being asked, are there receptor sites in the brain for common drugs? In those days, Valium. But what she found is that many of the drugs that we use, we also have the receptor sites and those drugs within our own makeup. So we have natural Valium and natural morphine in our body if we can stimulate that. But that really wasn't her program. It really was to look for these receptor sites. And she went in search of them, and she found these neuropeptides, which are tiny little proteins. We could call them little messenger hormones. And she found that these were released in response to stress. And when that happened, these little hormones attached to the cell membrane and the receptor site in the cell membrane, and that would cause a cascade effect which would change the way in which you deal with the stress. Now, what she found, there were hundreds of receptor sites, probably thousands of receptor sites, hundreds of these tiny proteins. And of course, what really upset probably the establishment was that there were more receptor sites, therefore more sites for us to change our body outside the brain. Because up till then, the brain had been God. Everything happened from the brain. And what she was being given the grant to prove was everything was about the brain. But what she found is that we react to stress emotionally before our brain knows what's happening. And that's fascinating. And so our emotional response is far more powerful than our thinking response. In fact, our emotions change our thinking and not the other way around. Now, because she found that many of these receptor sites were outside their brain and being affected by a wide variety of emotions, the establishment did for a time take away her grant, because they said, that's not what we wanted you to find. And I remember her being a little upset about that. But she did carry on and do amazing work. She really was the mother of psychoneuroimmunology, which was very big in the 80s and 90s. Very exciting work, tying together the psyche, the neuro, and the immunology, bringing together real psychospiritual work, mind-body work. And what she found, again, was that when I talk about hundreds of little neuropeptides, little messengers, it really said that despite these 4 emotions that I've spoken about, each of those emotions is broken down into 20 or 30 different ways in which you can be sad, 20 or 30 different ways you can be angry. And that made sense, because nothing is just as simple. It's almost layered upon itself. And a lot of those emotions, or those receptor site for emotions, were around the stomach, around the pancreas, around the area of the solar plexus. And this, of course, brings to mind the power of the solar plexus. I describe it like a large satellite dish. And you walk into a room and your satellite dish is scanning the room, mainly to hear the message, what do I need to do in order to be liked? Am I okay? Because the solar plexus is so much about self-confidence, personal power, feeling okay. It's not so much about fitting in as what do I need to do in order to be seen and liked as I am. It doesn't even matter about loved, it's just the being liked. And so our solar plexus development, as I probably described in previous podcasts, is very much developed during our early childhood. So I always imagine having a little tick list that the child at the age of 6 weeks starts to smile, someone smiles back, tick, smiling seems to be okay. I get a positive response. That's very solar plexus-like. Then the child starts to laugh and it gets an even better response. It goes, okay, laughing's even better. So we learn to laugh. And then we all get clapped as soon as we take those first steps. Yay, walking seems to get a good response. And then we're told, stop running around. Okay, that's not such a good thing. And the same happens with speaking. Nobody can wait for a child to speak. Oh, they said mama and said dada. And then we're told to shut up. Which all seems a little weird. But in a functional family, and I know all of you were brought up in functional families, a child learns how to assess its environment, especially in terms of other people, in order to be liked. And that is where a child develops confidence. And you know, the ultimate is for us to like ourselves without being affected by criticism or need for approval. Most of us aren't there. We're sensitive. And the more dysfunctional your family, the greater disturbance of your solar plexus. So if your family didn't talk about emotions, or if there was anger in your family or abuse in your family, or there was varying abuse, so 1 minute your father was in a good mood, then he wasn't, or vice versa with your mother, then you learned not to trust what they said, but to trust your solar plexus. What do I feel in the environment? What am I already aware of in other people? So it's your emotional chakra. It's where we pick up emotional stimuli, psychic stimuli, astral stimuli, whatever you want to call them. Our throat chakra is where we pick up mental or belief system stimuli. So here we are, coming back to Candace Pert's work. Here she proved that when we walk into a room, not only how we're walking in with a satellite dish, but we're also walking in with memories, because the other thing that the solar plexus does is hold on to memories. And you could say the memories are linked to different parts of the brain, the limbic system, etc. And what we're looking for, again, is where is there a threat? Not necessarily a physical threat, but a threat to my being liked, my feeling of confidence. Is there someone in this room who's going to criticize me? Is there someone in this room who could hurt me? But the problem arises is that the solar plexus doesn't have the filters that move us on to saying, maybe we're going to deal with this problem a different way. So maybe we met someone, if I may say, I'll call him Dave. I'm sorry, Dave, if you're out there. But maybe we had a man in our life when we were a child called Dave. And we were maybe not treated well by Dave. But we never deal with that. We just store that knowledge in our solar plexus. Hey, Dave lets me down, or Dave hurts me. So years on, you're meeting new people, totally different country maybe, or town, and this person says, hello, my name is Dave. And without being able to filter it or even take it to your brain, already your body is reacting to that and maybe defending itself, or you're turning away, or whatever you're doing. The problem with the solar plexus isn't just that it reacts from memories. And what our solar plexus really needs to do is, yes, I'm feeling sensitive. That's, again, what stresses you, my question earlier. But also, what am I going to change? What's the most loving thing I can do for myself? Take the energy to my heart. What's the wisest thing I can do? Take my energy to my third eye. How can I change my reaction? And it isn't enough just to say, I'm going to breathe out, or in this situation. We have to often go back to our first experience with Dave and find out what happened there, what emotion was suppressed perhaps, and if it's a young child, how can we as the older woman or older man go back and help our young child deal with this in a different way? Sometimes we just need to hug our young child, our inner child. Sometimes we say that will never happen to you again. Sometimes we have to write a letter we never send and mail it, or not mail it, I should say, burn it. You can mail it if you want, and put your feelings onto that paper. And if you are listening to me and you're saying, well, I don't know if I have any old emotions, if I say to you, can you remember a sad time in your life, and upwell the emotions, what I'm saying to you is that experience is still unfinished. There is still energy in that experience, whatever memory you went back to, where there is a gem of wisdom that you need to go and collect. So going back and maybe doing the things I've just suggested, or even talking to someone if they're still alive, to talk to them, to say, I need to finish, I need closure here. And it isn't from the other person, it's about myself. Where do I need to change? What do I need to do differently? Forgiving is not the other person's problem, it's ours making a choice to not give our power away to that situation anymore. So what are you needing to take from that situation that will help you? So emotions allow us to not only change, move, as I've suggested, bring healing. The healing also comes by memories, by restructuring our memories, by allowing ourselves to not see that experience as one that just happened to us, but seeing ourselves as wise, clever beings who chose an experience, but we never really understood why we would choose it and what we needed to take from that experience. What did I learn from it? What was the wisdom? What was the gem? You see, I don't believe in just shutting down people's emotions unless they are extreme and you can't cope in life. But for most of us, what is it that caused you to be traumatized in that situation? And how can I strengthen you, not just try and get rid of the emotion? The emotion is not the problem. The emotion is trying to tell us that there's an issue here. There's something we need to deal with. There's a messenger. And how can we use that to the best of our advantage? What needs to be brought out? What part of us have we buried? What part of us needs to come home? So healing truly comes from feeling. And many a time when we are feeling wounded, we don't necessarily want someone else to fix us, do we? If you're feeling upset, sometimes we just need a good witness. And to me, that's the best type of support. I want to tell my story. I want to feel my emotions. I don't necessarily want a tissue put into my face to stop me crying. I want to cry. And I want someone to hear me cry and to hear my words. I don't necessarily want their wisdom or their fixing. Later on, I might ask them for what they think. And that's different. That type of compassion that I'm talking about is different from empathy, where someone says, oh, I know exactly what you feel. Oh, in fact, I feel it. And you can see the person is actually crying for themselves, not for you. We need to do our own work, deal with our own emotions, so that when we're listening to someone, we can be truly present for them and not necessarily just for our own unfinished business. That's the best type of healing, especially for women. I found that when women share together, when we speak together, we share together, we don't want someone fixing us. In fact, it probably annoys us. We just want to share. And in texting and other things doesn't allow us that depth of feeling. Being able to look at someone eye to eye. Even sometimes being on the phone doesn't work it. Having time just to sit and talk and share, maybe over a good meal, over a good drink, whatever you do, just to curl up and talk. I mean, being comfortable where you are. So I just want to finish with the work that came on after Candace Pert's work, wonderful work. And that, of course, is the work of the cell biologist Bruce Lipton. I'm sure many of you have come across his work. Again, amazing pioneer who's gone on and done many other wonderful pieces. But his main work, the biology of belief, was the idea that if there's a receptor site on the cell membrane, and this is what Candace Pert was looking at, receptor sites, and that protein, that little messenger protein fits into that, he then showed that there's a cascade effect down to the nucleus, and where your gene, you may have a gene for a certain activity, the gene is inactive because there's a sleeve over it, literally a sleeve over the gene. It's a simple way of saying it. But when the key fits into the receptor site, the protein fits into that lock, the cascade effect causes the sleeve to pull back, and that gene is expressed. So this was, again, amazing work to realize that even if you have a gene to a certain illness, there's no reason for that gene to be expressed in your life as long as that sleeve continues to cover it. So the key was what is the receptor site? And that was where Bruce Lipton just took that work a little further, said this receptor site in the cell membrane are your beliefs, your perception of reality. And every time your belief is reinforced by your emotional experience, the stronger that receptor site gets. So, I don't know, let's say I keep losing jobs. Every time I go for a job, I don't get it. And so what happens, I feel distressed, but it builds the belief that I'm no good. Nobody likes me. I don't know. I'm not clever enough. And that intensifies into that one receptor site. That one belief that all we keep doing is creating from that place. We never take it anywhere else. We've talked about that before. Whatever beliefs you have, they are creating your reality. And what happens is we create it, we create the same emotion, we reinforce the belief, the receptor site never changes. So Bruce Lipton came across something like K he uses for trying to change perceptions. I know many of us have different methods of trying to change perceptions. Again, you could use affirmations, but affirmations are often on the same level you created them, which is what Einstein says, you can never change anything if you try to change something on the same level created, a belief to a belief. The other trouble with affirmation is we're often almost reinforcing the problem. And if you say, I'm not stupid, well, you keep saying the word stupid, of course it's going to have, you're just going to increase the receptor site. I know you don't say that, but if you say something like, I am beautiful and I'm wonderful, there's a part of you that goes, no, I'm not. So you can tell yourself that, but it doesn't necessarily change. What I like is to see the change happening in your body, to see the change happening in your being. Change your life. So if you say, my receptor site is that everybody needs me, I need to be responsible for everybody, then for 3 days, don't go on the emails, don't answer people when they call. Say, I'm taking 3 days out. Break the habit, break the addiction. And if you can't stop it for 3 days, you know you've got a problem. So whatever you're addicted to is what you're also creating as a receptor site. For 3 days, that's what Bruce Lipton showed. It only takes 3 days to change. Do whatever it is, but believe you are the change. Act as if the change has already happened. But changing it not from a place of, I don't have diabetes, but I love the sweetness of life. The sweetness of life is mine. Find an affirmation, a way of living life. So if you say the sweetness of life is mine, prove it, show it. What are you going to do? Do something that's pleasurable, that's sweet, that's joyful. Don't just think it. Nothing's going to change from the thinking. And because what happens is when we do it, we are generating and motivating those emotions. So when we feel happy, then our body starts to feel that happy. When we feel that we're using that energy of anger to move, everything moves with us. So there's no bad emotion. There's only chronic emotion that then causes chronic disease. Get to the bottom of that emotion. Find the raw form of it. Express it and live it. And with that in mind, truly this is the work of the heart, the work of the joy, the work to move the energy from the solar plexus, where it's all about, am I okay, to knowing you are loved. It's not about whether you're okay. Of course you are. You are perfect just as you are. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to the Heart Speak podcast with Dr. Christine Page. Remember to check out other episodes in the podcast archive section on www.christinepage.com. And do share with friends, family, and colleagues. Join us next time for another edition of Heart Speak.